Well, good afternoon, Tiger fans. Mark Fitzpatrick, Tiger Club of Kansas City. We appreciate you joining us on Zoom today. We were expecting some inclement weather and also hoping for a parade today, so we're doing this remotely. Gabe is joining us from Columbia, Missouri. If you're not watching us live, of course, and you're watching on YouTube, please like and hit our subscription. We are excited always to have our good friend Gabe DeArmond. He's covered Mizzou for 21 years. I think, Gabe, between you and your dad, 50 some years covering Mizzou. Is that right?
That's pretty close. My dad was I think 89 to 2012, so not quite 50, but we're getting up there. I did appreciate, by the way, in the email that you all sent out that I was referred to as the most veteran reporter, which is really just a kind way of calling me old at this point in time.
Well, sir, you don't know what old is yet. So,
I'm getting there.
hey, Gabe, thank you for joining us. I want to ask you one thing before we get started about Mizzou. PowerMizzou switched from Rivals to 247 Sports. How's that going, and what was behind that decision?
Yeah, it's I mean I would guess most people on here probably know where we're at and subscribe. If not, go to 247sports.com, go to Missouri and sign up. But I mean was really just like anybody else that owns a business, I kind of hit a point where contract was up and I had some options and had to make a decision what I thought was best for us. And the place we used to be, I felt like had slipped a little bit. I thought we would have more support. Over here, and that's proven to be true so far. We've gotten the vast majority of people I think have followed us, and certainly appreciate how many people did it as quickly as they did. It's gone well so far, and look, I think in 21 years of talking to you guys, this is probably about the best combination of how good Missouri's been at football and basketball at the same time. So I'm not saying that like that's because of our move or because of anything we did, but I'm also not saying it's not the case.
Yeah. I was figuring the other day, this is the first time in, I think, history that the Royals made the playoffs, the Chiefs made the playoffs, Mizzou went to a bowl game, and we think Mizzou will go to the NCAA tournament basketball. But let's talk
Yeah.
about Tiger basketball. Tough week, two losses to very good teams. But one thing of a concern, the Tigers are getting off to some slow starts. And you on your YouTube video, do we need to look at changing the starting lineup? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like tough week, but not a bad week, right? I mean, Tennessee and Texas A&M are top 10 teams, and they are top 10 teams that are built on elite defenses. And so I think is the starting lineup the problem? I don't know. I mean, they ended up scoring 81 points on Tennessee and really only played 34 minutes of that game. So the offense got going. I don't generally think who starts really matters. And I think Dennis does a pretty good job of, hey, if this guy is not playing well or making mistakes in the first 2 or 3 minutes, like he won't wait for the first TV timeout to make a sub. He'll do it sooner if he needs to. I know Caleb Grill has said he kind of likes coming off the bench and settling in, but I wonder too. I mean, what else is he going to say? When you come off the bench, that's what you say, right? You say the right thing for the team. I would imagine if Dennis said, "Hey, do you want to start?" he would probably say yes. And being, the I remember back in, I guess it would have been the 11-12 team. Mike Dixon came off the bench for that team. And Mike Anderson or Frank Haith, I'm sorry, was real clear. He said, "Look, I like having a guy to bring off the bench that can just come in and kind of light the offense on fire right away. If I put Mike in the starting lineup and I'm bringing, say, Matt Pressey off the bench, then the minutes might change a little bit, but I don't have that kind of spark in the offense off the bench. So if Gates likes Caleb providing that, I understand that. I think you have to look at Trent Pierce in the starting lineup just because he has not played well the last couple games. I mean, the shot hasn't been there, and the truth is, when the shot's not there, there's not a ton else that Trent is providing right now. I think he had one rebound against Tennessee. And look, if you're 6'10, there's got to be more than that. he had an uptick where he played pretty good defense for a little while. He hadn't really been on the floor enough in the last 2 games for me to know. Like, he started against Texas A&M. He also played 6 minutes. So that's where you go, I don't know, does it matter if those 6 minutes came at the start or in the middle? They clearly weren't going to come in the second half, because by that point, Gates had said, no, I've seen enough of this for today. We'll give it a shot next time. Dennis, excuse me, tends to be a guy that, as long as they're winning, he doesn't change the starting lineup a lot. So now that they've lost a couple in a row, even though they were the good teams, that might kind of be an excuse for him to go on Wednesday night against OU and say, hey, we're going to try something a little different look.
Looking at the team right now, 6-4 in the conference. Preseason, or going into the conference season, you said if they went 8-10 in the conference, you thought they'd make the SEC tournament. They should go 8-10 now. Are you still? Do you think they're a lock right now, barring a complete collapse?
Yes, they are a tournament team, barring a really, really bad finish. Now, I think at 8-10, I am confident they would get in. The two things that you kind of hesitate there is 8-10 would mean 2-8 in your last 10 games. Now, that's not an official thing that the NCAA tournament committee looks at anymore. They used to be, like, when I was growing up, that was one of the things they looked at. What's your record in your last 10 games? Because that matters to us. It isn't officially anymore. But also, if you're looking at two teams and one of them was 2-8 and one was 8-2, like, you can't, subconsciously that creeps in. The only scenario I see, like, let's say one of those losses is South Carolina at home. Well, that's now what they call a quad 3 loss. That's a bad loss. And Missouri doesn't have a bad loss yet. So at that point, that kind of almost counts like a loss and a half, so that one you absolutely have to win. And then the rest, like, I think if you pick up one, you're probably fine. But it would be, being 8-10 would be highly disappointing for this team, because they just went 6-3 through the harder half of their schedule. I mean, their last 5 games were a road game and 4 top 16 teams. They now play exactly 1 game against a team above them in the conference standings over the last 4 weeks of the season. Like, goal number 1 was get in. But at this point, the goals have to be bigger than just get in. I mean, you're playing at this point for, all right, let's push that seed up as high as we can get it.
I feel like it's been a really good season so far. And now I feel like I'm nitpicking problems. But one guy that's concerned me is Anthony Robinson. He averaged double digits over the non-conference season, and he scored 6 points the last 3 games total. Lots of turnovers, lots of fouls. What's happened with him?
Yeah, so I'm going to take blame for this one. Paul tried to blame me for the Super Bowl, and I won't wear that. That was not in any way my fault. I just sat at home and ate CJs, and it was very enjoyable. Until the game started. But with Ant Robinson, like, I was coming out of last year, I said, I don't know if I see it with him. Like, everybody was pretty high on him because he played a lot or played more than any other freshman, and he showed some flashes. And he just is a kid that he made me nervous watching him play basketball. Like, he fouled all the time. He seemed to be a little out of control, little sped up at times. And I said, I don't know if I see it. Well, then Ant got off to this red hot start, right? And I was like, yeah, I need to see a little more, And then finally, when I said, all right, I was wrong, this kid's really good. Well, then he started playing like crap. So my fault. I need to go back to saying Anthony Robinson's not good at basketball, and maybe he'll improve. Look, he has 2 big problems. Number one, he still can't defend without fouling. And I know that Missouri fans say, well, they ref him unfair. Look, we just go every post game. I just start with saying, I'm going to let you guys talk about the refs. I can't do this for every game unless it's brutally obvious, like, say, the Florida game earlier this year. But nobody else is consistently in foul trouble on this team. So I've got a hard time believing that Anthony Robinson is officiated differently than every other player in these games. And the second thing, and it's still fouls, but, like, when he has the ball offensively, if somebody gets close to him, he does this chicken wing where he sends the elbow at him. And it is incredibly easy to draw a foul. So I think I think the scouting report from other teams has to say, just get up in his face, crowd him, be physical with him, and he's going to give you 2 offensive fouls, which not only put him on the bench, but they're turnovers, So I think that's the number one thing he has to get under control. I mean, he had a little free throw issue. He seems to have gotten past that. He's shooting the ball much better this year than he has in the past. He's a good rebounder. He's a good defender when he doesn't foul. Like he makes them better when he's on the floor. He just has to figure out how to stay on the floor.
What do you look for against Oklahoma tomorrow night?
Yeah, I don't want to call it a must win because like you can lose this game and still make the tournament. We're talking 2-6, 3-5 finish. You'll be fine. But this is the second easiest remaining game on Missouri's schedule. I don't think OU will have any trouble getting here. I assume they're flying in sometime today, and the snow isn't really supposed to start until later tonight. So I don't think their travel should be impacted. But at home against a team that's 3-7 in the league, like with what this league is, these are the games you really need to win if you're the team Missouri wants to be. I mean, because you've lost 2 in a row. On Saturday, you go to Georgia. Like that's a winnable game. But I think the line will be like a pick 'em, Georgia by a point, right? Like good team, Kentucky lost down there. I think Florida lost at Georgia. I'm not sure. Somebody else good lost at Georgia. So like that's a losable game. You come back home for Alabama. Everybody knows what Alabama is. They're number 2 team in the country, maybe number 1 by the time Missouri plays them. That's a losable game. Then you've got a road game at an Arkansas team that's playing a lot better. So that's a losable game. So, if you don't get like 2 losses in a row is no big deal. I had a stat earlier this week. 13 of the 16 teams in this league have lost back-to-back road games. So everybody does it. It's not a big deal. But you don't want to extend it to 3 because, it's like the old major league line, right? Like 2 in a row is nice. 3 is a winning streak. 2 in a row, no big deal. 3 is a losing streak. And if you go to Athens on a losing streak, I think it's only natural you're going to start to feel a little bit of that pressure. So I don't really care what it looks like. Missouri just needs to win this game.
Bottom line, would you have ever expected the basketball team after last year to be where they are right now?
I mean, they're better than I thought they would be. I thought the tournament was a possibility. I think in the preseason, I picked them to win 17 or 18 games. And my opinion at that time was they're probably just going to end up just on the wrong side of the bubble because I knew how good the SEC was. And I thought they would be like a 6-12 team in the SEC. So obviously, yeah, they've exceeded those expectations. I think, and I know this is a hard adjustment to make, but like we've kind of got to get over what, especially in basketball, like what were they last year? I don't know if it matters anymore. I mean, and one thing I do think Dennis deserves credit for is it's not like he did this completely through the transfer portal, right? He did it with Tamar Bates was here last year. Ant Robinson and Trent Pierce are better players than they were last year. Caleb Grill actually has looked like the player they told us he was going to be last year and never was, either through ineffectiveness or injury. And I think I think his best decision was when Caleb could have come back last year. They talked and just said, there's no point. Like, we're not going anywhere this year. If we shut you down, you can come back next season. And, I'll be honest, in the offseason, I didn't get it. I said, why are they using an extra year on this kid? Like, I didn't see it. He didn't do anything when he played. Well, that's why they're the coach, and I'm sitting here on YouTube with you guys, right? They know a lot more than I do. So I think that was the best decision. But, as far as last year goes, like it's just a big combination of things. First of all, you can redo an entire basketball roster in a year now. Second, everybody else's roster looks different. And last year was just so like that was never an 0-19 team. I think we are seeing, like you see everywhere, how hard it is. Going 0-19 actually is much more unlikely than this team going like 13-5 or whatever. I mean, it is very, especially as many close games as they played. Like that wasn't a great roster, but they had the talent to win some games, and they were in some games. They just did a bunch of things. Like if you saw last weekend, LSU's leading Ole Miss by 9 points with like a minute 45 left and blow the game. Missouri did a lot of that last year, not necessarily in the last 2 minutes, but blew leads and just couldn't make any plays. So I think it's a good sign. Well, obviously it's a good sign to win more than 0 games, but also like it's a sign that last year was just this crazy perfect storm of not enough talent, a few bad decisions, and a lot of bad luck.
Talking with Power Mizzou publisher Gabe DeArmond, longtime friend of our club. If you'd like to ask him a question, we'll leave time at the end. Put it in our chat box. So let's turn to football. Gerard Hamilton had a nice piece this week. Tigers transfer portal class is up to sixth in the nation. Of course, they got the lineman from Georgia, Damon Wilson, and quarterback from Penn State, Bo Prabula. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
You
But
are. I'm impressed.
no, it's what I do. That's why I'm well paid in this position. So anyway, talk about it really seemed like Eli hit a home run in the transfer portal this year.
Yeah, I mean, it looks that way, right? Went out and got a lot of guys, and this is where like I've had to make an adjustment in the way I look at things. I mean, I've been saying for a couple years, like, when are we going to get to the point where you're not taking 18 transfers, right? Like, when are you going to give some of these guys? This is just what it is. I mean, this is just how it operates now, at least for the time being, until we get some, multi-year contracts in place and things like that. This is how it's going to go. You can't. There's really no planning for 2 and 3 years from now. I got to put the best team on the field I can put on this year. And if taking some of these transfers means some of these young guys leave, then I'll just go out and find more transfers to replace them next year. I mean, it's exhausting. I don't think it's the way Eli wants to do it, honestly. But that's the world they live in now. Obviously, Prabula, the headliner, Damon Wilson. I think we've got him the number 2 transfer in the country, oddly behind only his teammate Carson Beck, who is now the quarterback at Miami, which is, again, strange. Like, you're the starting quarterback for a top 5 team, the best program in the country the last 5 years. You just say, yeah, I'll just go down to Miami, which is supposed to be good every year, and it's never really happened. But that's again the world we live in. The guy I'm probably most interested in seeing is Ahmad Hardy. He's a running back from Louisiana Monroe, ran for, I think it was about 1,300 yards last year, and just like a compact, like bowling ball type of kid. I'll be interested to see what he does in the run game. So they appear to have addressed most of the issues. I won't say all, because I'm still not sure they're where they need to be or wanted to be offensive line wise. There's a chance I think they're a guy short there, so we'll see how that goes.
One name or one kid that kind of intrigued, is it Kevin Coleman, transfer from
Yeah.
Mississippi State? This is his fourth school in 4 years. Isn't that correct?
So
St.
fourth
Louis
and
kid.
4 or fourth and 5. Yeah.
He was at Jackson State, Louisville, Mississippi, but he put up some pretty good numbers last year. And he's a St. Louis kid. Could he be the replacement, not of equal Luther burden, but help offset his loss?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the goal. He's a slot receiver. He was second team All SEC last year, and truthfully, he should have been first team over Luther. Like, he had a better year than Luther did. Luther got that because Luther's name was what it was, and he had the hype going into the season. For everybody that says Missouri guys are always disrespected, I thought that was a case clearly of a guy whose numbers didn't tell me he should have been a first team All SEC receiver. But Coleman, not the same type of guy exactly, but he's going to play that slot role, and he's the clear number 1 receiver on this team, because they have some other, I think Josh Manning's got a chance to be really good. I like Marquise Johnson, but they don't really have anybody who's proven it day in, day out, and Coleman has. So bring him in to be that alpha in the receiving core, and then you've got Manning and Johnson is kind of your other starters, and then you bring in this freshman class, got some young guys on the roster. A couple who redshirted last year, and I think they've done a pretty good job of retooling that room. They don't have the star power, the name of Luther Burden, but I think certainly the hope is that Missouri has a more productive passing game than it did last year.
With the new quarter, is this Prabula's job to lose? Is Sam Horn in the picture? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's his to lose. he will go into spring football they won't put out a depth chart or anything because they never do, but he will go into spring football and he'll be taking reps with the ones. And, Sam Horn, I'm sure, will rotate in and get some. Drew Pine might rotate in and get some. And Eli will say on day one of spring practice, like every coach in America does, every job is open. We haven't made any decisions yet, blah, 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 blah. But they went out and actively pursued Bo Perbula and, paid him a fine amount of money to come be the quarterback. That does not guarantee it, right? I mean, when they say no job is open, like I get this all the time. Well, did we guarantee this guy the starting job? No, because coaches don't do that. You don't guarantee a guy a starting job and then get into spring football and go, oh man, this guy sucks. But like I told him he was going to start. That guy's way better, but I promised him. So I guess we got to do that, right? No, you go with the guy that's best in spring football and fall camp. And so Sam Horn's going to have every chance to win that job. I suppose so will Drew Pine. But I would be surprised if it's not Perbula.
What's the going rate for a quarterback these days with NIL? Any idea?
Kind of. I mean, you hear things. I think it kind of depends, right? The school, how desperate they are, what the guy's done. Like I've heard numbers for Carson Beck that indicates to me that he legitimately never has to play in the NFL. Like he's good, if he's smart with it, he'd probably be all right. Like Bo Perbula didn't get that, but he got a lot more than KOMU paid me in college. I know that. I'll just say this: it's seven figures. You want a starting quarterback at a Power 5 school, you're paying seven figures, and probably not on the super low end of seven figures.
It's a whole new world now, isn't it? Something else. Freshman class coming in. Anybody you see making immediate impact in football?
Yeah, I think the guy that jumps out to everybody is Donovan Olubade. He's a wide receiver. He's a top 100 kid, highest ranked player in the class. He's not like a necessarily pure speed type guy. He's a bigger kid, college ready body, probably an over the middle, kind of a little bit more of a possession receiver at the start. I'll be shocked if he doesn't play. I think Sean Terry, a wide receiver from Ohio, is going to find a role quite possibly as the return man to start and then see if he can work his way in offensively. On defense, Davion Hilson, defensive end. Some people have him a 5-star, some people have him a 4-star, but he's out of Florida. He's a guy that like we hadn't really heard his name. Then all of a sudden Missouri came on in December and suddenly was the favorite and signed him in December. He was an All-American. I think he's in the rotation because I think if you learned anything last year, like, look, if you're going to get a kid like that, he's got to play like, and not 30 snaps. And I'm not blaming Drinkwitz for Jaylen Brown and Williams Nwaneri leaving. Like you got to put the best team on the field you can. And if you don't think those guys are ready, that's fine. But you also have to know if a kid comes in as a national recruit and he's not playing, he's going to look elsewhere and see guys like him playing. And it may entirely be his fault that he didn't play, but it doesn't matter. He's going to go find another coach who will give him more money and tell him all the things he wants to hear. And then we'll go see if he plays more there.
Was Nwaneri the biggest loss in the transfer portal? Anybody else that they were really disappointed to see go?
The two that I have been told Missouri really would have liked to hang on to are Kawan Lacey, the running back who is now at Ole Miss, and Jaylen Brown, the defensive lineman who's at South Carolina now. And like, that's not to say that they wouldn't have loved to have Williams Nwaneri around, right? But he was, I think they were more okay with him going somewhere else than they were maybe those other two. And I don't know. It's that, I've said this for a long time. Like, it's why recruiting is just PR, guys. Like, yeah, 5 stars. If you get enough 5 stars, probably most of them are going to work out. But, how many stars you have stops mattering to anyone except the fans literally the day you step on campus. I mean, if it mattered, Williams Nwaneri would have started last year, and he didn't. He didn't really get on the field because the coaches looked and said, look, we just got other guys that are better, that are more ready, that can help us win right now. And so, I've seen a lot of people say, and I completely understand it, like, why should I care about high school recruiting? And I mean, well, you should care because, like, I'm trying to feed my family, man. Like that's a big deal to me. But ultimately, like you also should care less than you cared 5 years ago. And the truth is, it has never made any logical sense to get wrapped up in the recruitment of one individual kid. Like we're going to do it with Jackson Cantwell over the next 9 months. Like there are going to be people losing their minds every time there's an update, every time he visits somewhere. Got to get this kid back up the truck. Maybe he'll be an All-American. Maybe he won't. I don't know. One individual recruitment is not going to make or break you.
You just took my next question. I was going to ask you about Jackson Cantwell. So,
Yeah, I mean, look, Missouri's going to be in the running, right? I actually talked to his dad. They were at the basketball game a couple weeks ago. His dad and I were actually in school at the same time, and as I told Christian, a lot more people on campus knew him than knew me back in the late '90s. Missouri's going to be in the mix. I think it's Missouri, Georgia, Oregon are the three, kind of leaders. Then I believe it was Miami, Michigan, and Ohio State, I believe, were the other three schools he has in his top six. I would imagine he'll visit all of those places, maybe officially. I can't remember the rules anymore. Like, I think you can take more than 5 if you want to. But he'll visit, I think, most of them. But I think in the end, Georgia and Oregon are the big competition.
it's and also who will write him the biggest check, I assume, too, will be a big deciding factor.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not necessarily the big, like it's like any of us, right? Everybody just assumes you take the job that pays you the most money. It's not always the case. I mean, you take a job that pays you enough money, you want them to be in the neighborhood. But there are other things you look at. I would assume most of the people here have turned down money at some point because whatever, they like the people they were working for, they thought there was a better future, whatever. So it's not as easy as, hey, here's the biggest check, but certainly you have to be in the conversation. And also, any kid that does take the biggest check, good for you. Like I don't blame him.
Yeah. I'm going to jump to one of our questions. Garrett Vance asked, thoughts on Kirby Moore, which you talked about in your 10 thoughts yesterday. What are you hearing? He will go join his brother with the Saints?
I've had some people tell me that, but I've also had some people say that is far from a sure thing. I don't know. Did they officially announce that Kellen is the Saints coach? Like, I know it's happening. I don't know if it's been announced yet.
I don't know. Yeah, but it is a done deal as far as
yeah, he's going to get that today or tomorrow. So I saw a report from Ian Rappaport this morning that Doug Nussmeier might be his offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. Like, if Kirby goes to the Saints, look, he's not the Saints offensive coordinator. Right? I think that's probably safe to say. That would be I think that'd be a pretty head scratching hire for Kellen day one, to hire his brother, who has been a Power 5 offensive coordinator for 2 years as an NFL OC. But that doesn't mean, I mean, there's a lot of positions on staff, right? And, again, going back to the biggest paycheck, a lot of people have said, well, he would have to take a pay cut. Why would he ever do that? Well, you know what he wouldn't have to do? Get on a plane 42 days in a row and go fly around and see a bunch of high school kids and, kiss the ring. And recruiting has always been, I've told coaches for years, I don't know how you guys do this. Nick Saban line dancing. I couldn't do it. I would refuse. I would be an awful recruiter. But it's gotten worse now with NIL and with transfers and everything. I mean, recruiting is, I'm telling you, you're seeing coaches leave the sport because of it. So if you have the choice, and this isn't even about football, if I tell you, okay, in one job, you're going to make more money, but part of that job is you're going to babysit a bunch of 16 to 21-year-old kids every single day. You got to make sure they go to class enough that, they stay eligible and we still pretend that matters. You got to make sure they don't get arrested. You got to make sure they're studying the playbook, but you only get to be around them a certain number of times. You got to make sure they get everywhere on time, blah, 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 blah. Or you can go work with 53 guys who have non-guaranteed multi-million-dollar contracts that rely on them being good at this and caring about this. I know which one I'd take.
Wanted to get your thoughts on the first expanded college football playoff this year. It was the first weekend we had nothing but blowouts. The next weekend, all the teams that had byes lost. Does it need to be tweaked this in seating? And what are your thoughts?
Um, I after seeing it in practice, yes, Arizona State and Boise probably should have been in, but not the 3 and 4 seed. Maybe like give them a spot, but seed it the way you want to seed it. But ultimately, like I think we have a lot of revisionist history, right? When I was growing up, the Super Bowl was an awful game every
Yeah,
year.
yeah.
The
Was
national
this year too. So I would.
Right. Yeah. The national title game frequently was, I mean, I remember OU getting blown out. There were a lot of bad games in that. Like, the point is not give me the most competitive playoff you can. The point, I mean, Missouri, South Carolina never, ever matters in any other year before this one. The whole point of the playoff was everything leading up to the playoff. It was on November 10th, rather than us having 9 teams in college football who anybody cares about, we have 35. That's so much. It's so like everybody that said it was going to wreck the regular season. No, it made the regular season so much better because so many more fan bases, like literally Missouri went to South Carolina, and you can argue till you're blue in the face. I fall on the side of they could have won that game and still not gotten in. But like there was a world in which there's still a path. South Carolina still had a path. That game mattered not just to Missouri and to South Carolina, because it's always going to matter to them, but it mattered to Ole Miss and to Alabama and to SMU and to college football fans in general. That game never would have mattered before. So to me, yeah, we can nitpick here and there. I mean, I would like to see him at least stick with the same format for at least one more year. Like, you don't have to change everything for one year. Let's get a couple years in, see how this goes, and then hey, if you want to go back and make some changes, cool, go make some changes. I'm highly against any of this guaranteed number of spots for certain conferences and stuff like that. I mean, I do think if you win a Power Four league, I think you should get in, right? Because if not, why do we have conferences? I mean, if if you could, I don't remember who won the Royals division last year, whether it was them or I think it was somebody else. Cleveland, right? So let's say Cleveland would have won that division, but had the whatever the 5th or 6th best record in Major League Baseball. Well, they still get in because they won that division. That's the whole point of having divisions. And if you're not going to do it that way, then just get rid of conferences and say, yeah, we're just going to pick the 12 teams we want.
Since we talked to you last, we have a new athletic director, Laird Veach. Your thoughts on his first months in the job?
Yeah, I think, I mean, things are going well on the football field. I've always said an athletic director is largely judged by, do you have a good football team? Do you have a good basketball team? He does. Now, he didn't hire either of those guys, but that doesn't matter. He's in charge of them now. And as long as they, like, the best thing that could happen to Laird is that he never actually has to hire either one of their replacements, right? That means things have gone really well and they're happy here. He's I think the biggest thing he's done probably wasn't super popular with fans, but probably needed to be done, raising ticket prices and kind of revamping the way donations work. I think you guys probably understand a lot more about that than I do, because I don't really have to concern myself with it because I would lose my job if I donated money to Missouri, and that's not something I'm interested in doing. But I think he's done fine. He is probably less publicly visible than the last AD was for a variety of reasons. But anytime I've asked to talk to him, I've been able to talk to him, and I think he was qualified for the job. I think it's important to say that he was qualified for the job. Clearly, he was going to be a Power 5 athletic director. I think the curators set out and wanted to find somebody that kind of would assure them that there's no chance they have to do this again in 2 or 3 years, because they've done it a lot in the last 10. And so, again, number one, Laird was qualified. Number two, that certainly was a nice little bonus that, hey, I legitimately think this is where he wants to be. And if he leaves here, it's probably not going to be by his choice.
What's the latest on the end zone renovation project? Is it moving according to schedule? Fundraising?
Yeah, I
good?
got got a text from my wife on her way to work a couple days ago, and she said, "Holy crap, the football stadium's all torn up." Like if you drive down Stadium Boulevard right now, kind of heading heading past the north end of the stadium, you look and you can see the entire field because it's just a pile of rubble there. As far as funding and all that, they don't really like to share specific numbers with us. We've asked. It is progressing. I know the university they fancied up the language. The university basically just loaned or gave the athletic department $40 million. So I'm sure that is helpful. But I would assume that funding is going fine, and having more expensive tickets and all those things will help. And by the way, anybody on this call, I'm sure Laird would like me to ask you to pay their players as well.
Hey, let's talk about some of the other sports you talked about in your weekly column. Softball had a good start to their season. They avenged their loss to Duke. They're 15th in the country, but 10th in the SEC. So, but they should have a legitimate chance to make the World Series this year, I would think.
Yeah, so if you are an SEC softball team, I'll relate this to the Chiefs for you guys. Like I would get texts from my friends like in the week 3 game, stressing out. I'm like, guys, they have 17 practices. Like none of this matters. They're going to be in the playoffs. They have 17 practices to get ready for it. SEC softball teams have about 40 practices, 50 practices to get ready for the NCAA tournament. Like, unless you are just awful, you are going to be in the NCAA tournament. Now, obviously, you want to win as many of those as you can to help your seed to host the first round, potentially the second round, all that. Missouri, I think that the clear goal is a regional host, and probably a super regional host. I mean, there's 16 of those, I think. I could be wrong. It might be 16 regional hosts and then 8 super regional hosts, I guess. But the clear goal is to play at home as long as you can in the postseason. Had a good start to the year. Larissa's got that program going pretty well, but they've been in 6 super regionals since they made the 2011 World Series, and they're 0-6 in those regionals. Now, those are not all her, but that's like you got to kick. That's the door they need to kick down, because it sounds like nobody's getting fired for consistently going to the super regional, right? But we all know how fandom is eventually. Okay, we're here every year. We need to get to that next place.
And gymnastics ranked 9th in the country and had very good performance. I guess LSU in a loss, but they were the number 2 team in the nation. So that program's doing very well.
Yeah, I've said like they're as close to winning a national title as any program at Missouri. 9th in the country, I believe. 8 make the. I mean, they go through a bracket, right? You got to be in the top 2 of 4 in the first round, then top 2 of 4 in the second round, and then the top 8 teams go to the NCAA championships. Missouri got there a couple of years ago, did not get there last year. So, ranked 9th in the country. That's the goal, right? Be one of the 8 teams that goes, and I'm not exactly sure where it's at, but that goes and has a chance to win a national championship.
Talk about the baseball team for a second. The SEC, as good as we think it is in football and basketball, might be the best in better than all of them in baseball. Tough call for Kendrick Jackson. I think he had a pretty good year recruiting. Can they make the tournament? Right?
Maybe. I mean, honestly, can they make the SEC turn? That's the first step, right? You got, I don't know what it is, 15 teams, whatever, 12 of them are going to get in, 16 teams, 12 of them get in. And maybe they've revamped the tournament. I honestly don't follow baseball every day, but now that there's a more even number of teams, you might all get in. But it's just, look, guys, I've given the same answer to this question like 15 years in a row. It's just so hard in this league for a school that they've just never done anything to show they care about. Yeah. I mean, I don't, and we had one of our guys sat down with Carrick a couple weeks ago, and I think that story ran last week, and kind of asked him about NIL, and without saying it, he basically said like, yeah, we gotta find some different ways. Like Missouri's not swimming in the baseball NIL waters that the rest of this league is swimming in, because it's important at the rest of those schools, and nobody here has ever really acted like it is.
Yeah. Coach Jackson came up and talked to us a while back, and impressive guy. He's got Tim James on the staff, but boy, they got a tough road.
Yeah, I mean, I remember before Steve Beazer was hired, I was talking to a former major leaguer who told me, man, I just think Missouri's a great job. I think it's a sleeping giant kind of job. And I said, why? I said, I would never take that job. Like, Not in the SEC, maybe in the Big 12, but in the SEC, you're just like, they're asking you to compete with teams that just have more passion and more resources in every single way than you do. I mean, it's not unlike, the Royals for 25 years. Like, yeah, all those teams have better players than you do, but you need to go beat them. Well, no, we're not going to pay for better players. Like, you have to use the worst players to beat the better. Well, that's really hard to do, So, yeah, I mean, if Carrick can find a way to sneak into the NCAA tournament, Ole Miss finished something like 10th in the SEC a couple years ago and won the national title. Like, if you can get in, who knows? But their path really is through the non-conference schedule. I mean, last year they were something like 13-11 non-conference. That's not good enough. I mean, you've got to be, because you are going to get beat up and take losses in the SEC. Like, the goal is get somewhere close to 500 in SEC play. Well, that means you got to go out and go like 18-6 or something in the non-conference season. Like, you've got to get wins against these non-SEC teams. I think they start Friday in Puerto Rico against Penn State, Connecticut, Stetson. I'm afraid we're going to run out of time before I can give you my in-depth scouting reports on those three teams. So I apologize. But
All right, you ready to take some questions from our viewers?
Always.
Again, we're talking to Gabe DeArmond, publisher at PowerMizzou, longtime coverage of Tiger sports. He knows as much, if not more, than anybody. We're glad to have him. All right, any thoughts on why the drop-off in Trent Pierce's game seems to be healthy?
I mean, it's just, look, he's a sophomore. He's thin. It's consistency, right? I mean, this is a kid who, for all intents and purposes, is playing his first season of college basketball. He barely got on the floor last year because of injury, illness, all that. So it's a long season. Most of these kids haven't played, they play a high school season. What's that? Probably 19, 20 games. And the games aren't nearly as physical as these are. So I think you see young players, unless they're these special, hey, going off to the NBA pretty soon. I mean, Cooper Flagg doesn't seem to have hit a wall, but I don't think Trent would be offended by me saying he's not Cooper Flagg. I think it's just the natural, like, hey, there's kind of ebbs and flows, unless you're talking about kind of the upper crust star player. I mean, even, Caleb Grills had a few down games. Tamar Bates has had some days that haven't been as good as others. I just think it's kind of a natural thing. I think there will be a game where Trent is a big key here down the stretch at some point, but it hasn't been the last few.
Paul asks, John Moore, thoughts on Warwick finishing the game on Saturday as opposed to Robinson or Perkins?
Yeah, I mean, we asked Dennis about that, and he said, hey, those are the guys that got us back in it and got us the lead, and I thought they had earned the chance to finish the game. And I do understand. Look, if you would have preferred Ant Robinson or Tony Perkins as the defender on that last play, like, Robinson's a little longer, maybe he contests that shot by Wade Taylor by a few more inches, but like, Warwick had played well. He had two huge steals, so I didn't have a huge problem with it, but I do understand those people who said, hey, I'd rather seen Perkins or Robinson in there. I get it. The bigger problem than that possession was the offensive possession before, where Missouri had to settle for a 2 seconds on the shot clock. Tamar Bates kind of guarded fadeaway 19-footer. It's not the shot you want to get. And Dennis said as much after the game. He said, look, that possession, I could have called timeout. I didn't. I thought we'd get something. We didn't. So my fault. And like, I know obviously you would like that not to have happened. But to me, when a coach gets up there and said, yeah, I probably messed up, like, hey, we all mess up. As long as you get up there and own it, I don't really know what more you ask for.
Paul asked, John Tanji, did Gates want him back, or was he invited to look around?
Like, I don't think he was told to leave. But I don't know if they like tried to fight to keep him. I mean, let's be honest, because I talked about Caleb Grill, right? I wasn't sure why they were bringing Caleb Grill back. If they had come off 0-19 and like brought back Tanjay and Grill, I don't think the reception to that would have been very kind from the fan base. I think it would have been a whole lot of, what the hell is this guy doing? Now, hey, hindsight being 2020, like, John Tanjay is having a hell of a year. And if you add him to Caleb Grill and Tamar Bates, then yeah, it'd probably be pretty nice, right? You could probably lead the country in scoring, but I don't think they told him like you have to go, but I also don't think they necessarily fought to keep him around. And if the choice was him or Grill, like I don't think you made a bad choice. I don't think Tanjay would obviously have been a bad choice either, but I think Caleb Grill's turned out pretty well.
Darren wants to get your opinion on some Chief stuff. Is Kelsey
Okay,
done?
I want to say these are only opinions. I have no
Yeah,
inside information.
that's all. That's all we ask. Is Kelsey done? That's the first one.
Man, I kind of think so. I just like it's clear if he's okay coming back. I was listening to Jeff Shadia this morning. If he's okay coming back and being like the third or fourth receiver and just kind of being a role player, cool. But guys like that maybe aren't wired that way. And I think they put a whole lot. Like I thought he would have retired after last year if it wasn't for the three-peat deal. I think you come back, you take your shot. I'm like, okay, yeah, you can come back and I don't know, I guess maybe get to another one or win another one next year, but it's not guaranteed. That's a lot of time to put into it. I don't know if you guys have noticed, he seems to have some other things going on in his life. He seems to like he could probably entertain himself okay if he didn't play football. My guess is, and Travis was my oldest son's favorite player back when he was a jackass and everybody hated him. He was including me, but like he was my son's favorite player from day one. Absolutely loved him. And so I texted him before the Bills game and I just said like, hey, take a minute to like know this might be the last time you see this guy ever play football. Cause that's a thing that we should all appreciate, right? And I said, whenever he announces it, I said, I'm going to start looking into how I get tickets to Canton in 5 years because that'd be pretty cool.
More Chiefs. How much longer for Andy Reid, do you think?
Well, he's the opposite of Travis. What else he going to do, man? Like this is what he does, right? Didn't the Raiders just hire Pete Carroll? He's like 7 years older than Andy Reid.
Right.
I don't know. I think Andy's in it as long as his health lets him be in it.
And do you think how many more Super Bowl appearances? And I'm just reading the questions here. So, Super Bowl
Yeah,
wins for Mahomes.
I don't know. I'll say he gets two more, right? Like, I think the thing that, and like I've really tried, I really have as a Chiefs fan tried to like. I told a bunch of friends before that game on Sunday. I said, I hope they win, but I'm not like I went 42 years, and the best they ever did was lose the AFC title, and that's now the worst they've ever done in the last 7 years, right? So, I think people forget too that Tom Brady went 10 years without getting there, without winning one. And like the marvel of Tom Brady isn't just that he won 7 and went to 10, it's that he played till he was 45 years old. Like that's insane. Most people aren't going to do that. So I don't know. Let's say Pat has 10 years left. Like he's going to have to do it without Travis and he's going to have to do it without Chris Jones. And he's going to have to do it with all these, like that was Brady had 3 acts in his career, right? He had the first one that was led by the defense. Then he had the second one with the, uh, that kind of came up and had a few guys, and then that third act, kind of when they bring Moss in and Gronk really turned into a star and all that, and then goes to Tampa for like Act 3.5, I guess. So,
Yeah.
We're like at the end. I think we're at like the beginning of Act 2 for Mahomes.
That's good assessment. We need to get a left tackle too.
Yeah,
For that. So,
I'd take
okay.
one.
Yeah. Any talk of contract extensions for Gates or even Drake?
Um, I think it's possible. Gates is under contract for 4 more years. So, like, somebody's asked me about this, and I said, understand that literally 6 months ago, Missouri fans wanted to kill Desiree Reed Francois for signing Dennis Gates to this contract. Like, this is the dumbest thing that's ever been done. Thank God she's in Arizona. We can't fire him because we owe him $25 million. He can't even win an SEC game. And now he's 17-6, and it's like, when are we going to extend him? I don't understand why it has to be one or the other. Like, if Dennis comes in after the year and says, or his agent calls and says, hey, Indiana's calling and North Carolina's calling and the Pistons are calling, okay, then you might have to do it. But I don't think Indiana or North Carolina is calling, because they would have to pay $17 million just to hire him. Like, that's before they actually pay him. That's the good part of that contract. Is it's not just that Missouri owes him that much money if he leaves, it's that he owes Missouri that much money if he leaves. And college basketball teams with revenue sharing coming up ain't paying a $17 million buyout. And if the NBA calls, hey, Dennis, probably take that job. I would take that job, right? If somebody's offering you a chance to be an NBA head coach. So to me, I mean, first of all, let's get to the end of the year, right? Because like, I remember, Konzo's second to last team at one point was 10th in the country. And then by the end of the year, it was like, geez, they barely got in and lost their first tournament game. So let's see how this ends. Personally, I wouldn't do it unless there's some reason I don't know about to do it. I think you have to do it after next year, but I don't see any reason to do it after this year. With Drink, I think he got one after last year. So again, I'm kind of in the same place. I mean, he didn't get another job this offseason. At this point, all the job that, like, no NFL team's hiring him as their head coach. So I don't know if you really have a reason to do it. And again, with revenue sharing, like, you're seeing coaches across the country actually give some of their money back to revenue sharing, right? You've seen Brian Kelly did it. I know you've seen these coaches donate like $1.5 million back to the university. Like, I don't see any reason to spend more money than you have to at this point on either one. And that's not saying they haven't done a good job. And if they come in and they're bitching and, you have to do it, you have to do it. But I wouldn't do it voluntarily yet.
Two questions about Robin Pinkston. Any chance she comes back? If not, any rumors about a replacement? Will the same disinterest mean she'll be back next year as what happened last year?
I mean, she has no contract beyond, I think it's April 30th is when it expires. If she was going to be back next year, she would have a contract. Right? Like, there's not even really a decision to be made. The decision has been made by not renewing the contract. I can't imagine a scenario where they're going, oh yeah, hey, 4-14 or 4-12 in the league. Yeah, let's I mean, if it was going to be done, it would be done. I mean, replacements, I'm not going to pretend that I ask around, and when it gets to that point, I might check with some people and see. I know that there's a lady named Molly Miller who's coaching at Grand Canyon University. She used to be at Drury. She's a big, she's one a lot of people talk about. UNLV's coach, Lindy LaRoque, is a name that I know fans have brought up. I think that would have been a pretty likely hire, obviously, if the old AD was still here. I'm not sure it's as likely with Laird Veach. Those are the two names that like fans seem to be putting out there. But again, I don't know enough about the landscape and who's good. You would think Missouri could pay, but also it's kind of like what we talked about with baseball, right? Like, every time women's basketball comes up on our site, people get into the, man, why won't they make an investment? They've told you guys, they don't care. I mean, they've told you. They literally would not spend $400,000 after last year because they would rather spend that money on football. They have told you it doesn't matter to them. So it can matter to you. You can get angry, but it's not changing. So if I'm a coach looking at that, I'm going, why would I do this? Like, you're asking me to make a 5-star meal and you're giving me $8 to shop at Aldi. Like, what are we doing here? So barring a donor stepping up and saying, look, women's basketball is really important to me. Here's NIL money, and I want it to go to the coach. And look, I can't honestly even argue with it. I mean, Laird talked about Missouri's $35 million behind most SEC schools, right? Every dime of that you make up needs to go to football and men's basketball. It just does. I mean, I know and that's not disrespect to the people who do these other sports. They work just as hard, and it's very important to them. And I understand the fans. I had 2 kids that played, non-revenue sports in college. I get it. It's important to people, but it's losing you money, and it's always going to lose you money. And so, women's basketball loses like $3 million a year. I don't know that there's any point in losing $5 million a year.
I want to ask you as we wrap up, you get around to all the other schools. How are Mizzou's facilities compared to the other SEC schools?
Yeah, well, number one, I honestly get to a lot less of them than I used to. I have people to do that. They do the traveling. I don't think I went to a road game this year. Might have gone to one. I can't remember. No, I didn't go because I was going to go to UMass at one point, and we went to Boston last year, so I didn't go. But also I just I don't see that part of camp. I see the stadiums, but like weight rooms and stuff behind the scenes, I really don't see. I know it was very important to Eli that they do this stadium renovation. Like it's a big thing with them. Like we want to have a stadium that we can be proud of in this league, and they didn't feel like they did. So I know that was a big deal to get this north end zone thing done and approved and rolling to them. But as far as the inner, the guts of most of the rest of the facilities, I honestly haven't seen most of them.
Yeah. Well, Gabe, we're about the end of the hour. We really appreciate your time. I'm going to ask you as we leave, what do you think of the Royals this year?
So I do not really follow off-season baseball. Last year around like I had not watched the Royals for like 4 years. And then, because I couldn't get a lot of the games, but I can now. And I don't pay extra for it. So I'm happy about that. But, last year, probably around June 1st, I was like, hey, they're interesting. I'll tune in. And like, I got back into it and it was fun. And, it was enjoyable to see him make the playoffs and all that. I couldn't tell it. Like, I was glad they traded Brady Singer, but I couldn't tell you what their starting rotation is. I know Bobby Witt's still around. That makes me happy. I know Sal's still around. That makes me happy. But I'm not tuned into it yet.
Okay. Well, you were pretty passionate about it during the 15 World Series, I remember, right?
Oh, that was a ball. Like I told somebody this just yesterday. Like after 2014 and 2015, I got everything I needed out of that franchise. Like that was a ball. It was just the most fun I've ever had as a sports fan. And like, if they lost 100 games from that day till the day I died, I would have been fine. They were really bad, and I tuned out. And then they got good, and I tuned back in. And if they're good this year, I'll tune back in again and watch the broadcast on mute.
All right. Dave, thank you. We appreciate your knowledge on Mizzou, and we like it that you're a Kansas City guy too. So keep up the good work, everybody. Go to 24/7 Sports. I heartily recommend a subscription. It's great. I truly look forward to your 10 thoughts on Monday morning every week. That's a must read for me.
Appreciate you guys having me. And I don't know if Joe can FedEx me a burger down here. I do miss that part of not being able to make the trip today, but appreciate you guys doing this.
All right. Next week, we will have Mizzou historian Bob Brendel, former sports information director, will be back in person, weather permitting, at the Westport Flea Market. And don't forget, you can register now for a golf tournament in June. For more information on memberships and other events, go to kctigerclub.com. Everybody have a great day, and thanks for joining us.